Good morning, everyone. I'd like to welcome y'all to the MEC annual meeting and to our second session this morning on landing the big one. As you know, economic development is a key part of being able to move Mississippi forward. And today we have a wonderful panel for y'all to hear from that talks about what it takes, the cooperation between many different groups that are out there that make economic development possible. And as you know, in the last few years, we've had a great run of landing some big economic development projects here in the state of Mississippi. And the gentlemen that are on the stage with me this morning all have played a part in that in some fashion. We got a great panel. I'm going to introduce them here and then do a little more formal introduction as they come up. To my left is Jonathan Daniels. He is with the Mississippi State Port Authority. Ed Garner, who handles economic development for Entergy. Joe Max Higgins from the Golden Triangle Link. And our first speaker this morning is going to be Brian Useforge, who is the Director of Economic Development with Mississippi Power. Brian leads a team of professional economic developers at Mississippi Power, and they really do support state and regional economic development in bringing commercial investment into the state of Mississippi. He began his career at Mississippi Power as a co-op student at Mississippi State University, later joined the company in the industrial marketing account as an account representative, and then went on to customer service and commercial marketing and management. He is very active in the economic development community and in his community at home. He is also a graduate of MEC's Leadership Mississippi program. So we're very happy to have him this morning, and please welcome Brian.
Thank you, Scott. It's a pleasure to be here, and I appreciate the opportunity to come and talk about economic development. My colleagues here are going to talk to you in more detail about very specific successes that we've seen around the state in recent times, and really what it took to get those wins. I'm going to set the stage for them primarily just by talking at a higher level about what it takes to be in the position to compete for and win those projects. I'm going to be about 30,000 feet higher than the group this morning and talk at a much more macro level. I've been challenged to do this in 10 minutes to talk about how to land the big one, so I'm going to talk brief and I'm going to talk extremely fast, so stay with me. What I first want to point out is that I could have easily called this landing the medium one or landing the small one, because the factors that are needed for success in landing a big project are primarily the same regardless of its size. There are a few nuances, but what's needed to land these big projects is primarily the same across the board. I want to start with a quote from Bear Bryant, and no matter your brand of football, I think we'd all agree that the Bear knows what it takes to win, and he says it's not the will to win that matters. Everyone has that. It's the will to prepare to win that matters. And I would tell you in economic development, I believe that's actually more important than it is in football, because in economic development, without the proper preparation, some of which you heard this morning, we don't even get the chance to compete, much less win. So I think I can skip this next slide. For those of you who know George Freeland, Executive Director at Jackson County EDF, he used that quote a couple weeks ago, and I stole it, and I was afraid he might be in the audience, so I was going to give him credit. He's not here, so forget that I said that. And as Joe pointed out, he's an Auburn grad using a Bear Bryant quote, so it's very powerful. Let me talk about why to prepare, and I'll tell you, I've learned from my children, if you're going to talk about what you're going to do and how you're going to do it, you first have to talk about why. Because if you can't convince them that there's a reason, then you really never get to those next two steps. So it sounds simple, but why do we prepare? And I want to talk about preparation, and we'll talk about what that means, but I like to talk about it in terms of the site selection process. I think it's important to know something about the site selection process because it lends itself to why preparation is so necessary. And I always love the depiction of the funnel as we talk about that process, because especially in the projects you're going to hear about this morning, companies in general cast a very wide net to start with a site search for their project, and it's this massive number of states and sites in general, and as they get through their site selection process, it pares down until they ultimately pick the site. As Chad said just a little while ago, we never try to win a project. We're always just trying to avoid elimination and stay in the game. 2 points I want to make, and I'm not going to go through the process at all, but I want to make 2 quick points. Generally, that site selection process starts with some type of a request for information, and that request can be very voluminous, a lot of questions, a lot of things you've got to know. To have a week to respond to that is probably a luxury. I think it's generally more days, sometimes a couple. And so Chad made a comment about knowing the product, and that's critical. But it's having done the necessary work to even have the information to know that's the most critical. The easiest way to get eliminated from a project in step one is just not to be able to fill out the RFI. And believe it or not, it's probably more common than we would like it to be. The other point I want to make is from top to bottom, these projects are never the same. I've heard of a project recently, a large project that landed in the state of Alabama, that the entire process from start to finish took 3 months. So can you imagine if you haven't done your due diligence and you're trying to land a large project like this? I think we've all heard stories about communities, unfortunately, that would tell you, I'm not going to invest in this study or that study, or I'm not going to purchase the property until I know somebody's interested. Well, by the time somebody's interested, it's really too late to start your preparation. So key issues there. And I'll get into, when we talk about what we're going to prepare, I think you heard I'm a marketing guy. I started, even though I'm an engineer, I really spent a lot of my career in marketing. When I think about selling stuff, I really go back to the basics of marketing and the fundamentals. And the fundamentals of marketing, and you all learn this at some point, whether you know it or not, if you took your fundamentals of marketing class, but it's all about the 4 Ps, about product, place, price, and promotion. And that's simply to say that you've got to have a product to sell. It's got to be in the right place or the right location. It's got to be priced competitively. And you've got to have an effective promotion campaign to allow people to understand what your product is and how it can benefit them more so than your competitor's product. And that's what we have to prepare for, and that's how we have to prepare when it comes to economic development. And I'll just touch on each one of these very quickly, and that'll be my time. But as it relates to product, it's all about site. I really lump workforce in that too, because having a site and having the available workforce is the cornerstone of any project, and without it, we don't need to talk about the other 3. But as it relates to site, there's really more to it than just having a flat piece of farmland that looks like a beautiful place to put a manufacturing facility. You heard a story this morning from Kerry about putting a site in the wrong spot and the detriment of that. So product, and you're going to hear a lot more about product from these 3 gentlemen, and I'm not going to spend any more time on that, but talking about place, location, we can't do anything about where the state of Mississippi is, and we really can't do anything about where our communities are. It's just where we are. But you can affect place when it comes to preparation. And the key is, going back to the site discussion that Kerry had, it's more common than you would think that a community would invest in an industrial site later to find out that it can't get the water, sewer, and gas or electricity for another 2 years, or that they can't get the capacities they need to land a big project. They've got 1,000 acres, and they're out marketing, and they're really out recruiting, but they don't have a chance. And so a lot of due diligence has to take place, and it affects the place that you put your product. The other thing that I would mention as it relates to place is communities. A lot of times you really can't do anything about where you are, and a small community may not have a good site, just doesn't exist. But a region may have a good site. And so as communities band together in a region, you become bigger instead of a small place. And so that makes all the difference in the world when you're out trying to land these big projects. And without a regional team, that's easier thing said than done, because I always believe that true regionalism only takes place when everybody's equally as excited no matter where the project goes. And that doesn't always happen. So that's how you plan for place. Now price, things do come down to price, but you don't get to price until you get the first 2. And you've got to know all of the factors involved in cost. And there are many: land, labor, construction, utilities, taxes, training, logistics, and the list goes on and on. But knowing even simple things like, are we willing to give this land away or are we not? Those things are really good to know before you get into the intense negotiations with a large project. Certainly as it relates to incentives, understanding what the state has to provide, but knowing locally what you're willing to do, and you don't want to get in situations where you know what it takes to win the project and you can't get the local leadership to agree to do it. And so it's great to know these things beforehand, certainly educating the local leaders on the values of those things. Incentives, as we say, never make a bad project good. They just make a good project better. But they're always a necessary thing, and they always come into play at some point during the project. And I'll say lastly on promotion, I won't get through a lot of these issues, but information is key, and it's abundant, and you should know that. It's important to have your information for your community out in the public domain. Communities get evaluated all the time and eliminated without ever knowing there was a project. And the person that did that did it from a computer screen. And that's happening more and more, and especially Chad mentioned the millennials. These consultants are hiring a lot of millennials who really like to be on the computer and doing a lot of research. And there's enough information, whether it's the right information or the wrong information, to really sort of think about the top of that funnel and get those 50 sites down to 25. You can do that. Always think about if you've ever tried to hire someone and you get 50 applications and you think of what you go through kind of quickly just to get that down to a manageable number, and you look for anything you can to eliminate some of those applications, and that's exactly what's happening to sites. So I'm going to finish with, I'm going to blow through those and then finish with one more quote from Zig Ziglar, and he says, "Success happens when opportunity meets preparation." Preparation is key, but I will mention that opportunity and preparation rarely lead to success in economic development. We don't win very often. But the key is that without the both of them, then you have no chance for success. And I think that statement is a perfect segue into what you're going to hear from the next three presenters. And so thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Brian. Our next speaker this morning is Joe Max Higgins, who is the CEO of the Golden Triangle Development Link and has served in that capacity since 2003. I'll tell you, first time I ever talked to Joe Max was when I was business editor of the Clarion Ledger, and I called Joe Max. I said, "Hey, what is this thing called a mega site?" And he started explaining what it was and what it could do. And it's amazing what you've seen happen in that area. And really, when you look at Joe Max's career, he's recruited over 130 major community and economic development projects, creating nearly 15,000 manufacturing jobs and many more jobs in the retail and commercial side of things. He's a nationally certified planner, community and economic developer, and environmental consultant. Recent accolades include the Link was received the Economic Development Award from the Site Selectors Guild. He's been named the Mega Developer of the Year by the Tennessee Valley Authority, and he and two other Mississippi economic developers were selected to Consultants Connect 50 top North American economic developers. Please welcome Joe Max Higgins.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you, Scott. I'll tell you this. You know, landing the big one, come and talk about landing the big one. I'm shorter than Brian, okay? Better looking, smarter, just shorter. Okay, now, talk about landing the big one. Come, I want you to talk about 15 minutes on landing the big one. Impossible. I just spoke to the students at the business school at Mississippi State last night for 2 hours just on Yokohama. After it was over, some of them, be 3 or 4 of them, stayed for another hour, and we talked more about it, okay? These projects are hard. The reason they're big, there's a lot of moving parts, But like Brian said, you know what, and I talked to the interview before we started today, the big ones, the medium ones, and the small ones all generally have some of the same similarities, okay? And if you can do the right things right, the things you need to do, if you're good at what you're doing, then maybe you can land a big one, okay? But in fairness, most places here can't land the big one. It's just a matter of fact. It's not going to happen, okay, unless you got a lot of things going in your favor, okay? And the first thing you really I'm sorry, guys, I mean, it's reality, okay? Not everybody gets the big deals, okay? But here's what I'm going to tell you, kind of analogy before we start talking. We did the sports analogy a while ago. Most of you in the room, I'm looking at you, are old enough or sportsy enough, and in the South that includes the girls too, so you don't have to worry about this, to remember the Washington Redskins and the Hogs, right? Some of y'all going to get a nod from somebody? Bart Wise knows this story, okay? Matter of fact, Bart Wise, one of my former chairmen out there in the crowd, when we started coming up with ideas, he said, "Don't tell nobody. Don't tell nobody what we're doing. Keep it a secret, they'll steal it." I said, "Bart, if you're going to have one idea in your life, guard that son of a gun like who would have thought it." I'm going to have about 3 or 4 a week. By the time they figure out what we're doing this week, we're going to be doing something else next week, and it really doesn't matter. I said, I subscribe to a different philosophy, okay? The Washington Redskins and the Hogs have a lot of similarities in economic development. Seriously, raise your hand if you remember the Getty, I know you do. Washington Redskins and the Hogs, okay? Aside from having basically an all-pro line, an all-pro quarterback and an all-pro running back in Rigo, right? What else? What was their signature play? This is interactive. I'll come out in the crowd if you don't answer, okay? What was their signature play? Somebody. We are in the Southeastern Conference football world, right? The play was called the counter tray. You heard Madden. They're going to run the counter tray. Basically, here's how it works, okay? The quarterback comes under center. He's got his fullback, halfback, he's Higgins, so he's a fullback, behind him. You got the tight end starting on the left-hand side. Quarterback goes into cadence. The tight end starts going in motion to the right side, okay? As soon as the ball is snapped, the quarterback gives a fake to the left. The running back gives a fake to the left. At that time, both the guard and tackle pull. What happens? You got a fat-ass center, 2 fat-ass guards, and 2 fat-ass tackles out front with the tight end, plowing away for a fat-ass fullback to get 2 or 3 or 4 yards, okay? And here's what I'm going to tell you. It works. One of the best middle linebackers in the world, Michael Singletary, that played for the Bears. Y'all remember him? He always had that look, okay? So deer in the headlights when he was playing Washington. They would go up to Mike Singletary. It was 3rd and 2, 3rd and 3, and they said, Mike, you know we're going to run counter tray, and we're going to run it right over your ass, and they did, okay? So I will tell you that if you master, and that's a very simple thing, this plays, look at it on paper, it's very simple. If you can master that and do it better and better and better, then all of a sudden the game slows down and everything gets kind of easy. How do I click this, brother? Forward? There we go. Okay. A little bit of talk about the MegaSite program, okay? How many of you 10, 15 years ago ever even thought about Columbus, Mississippi unless you're thinking about the pilgrimage? Anybody? Anybody? How many of you kind of know Columbus GTR is on the radar screen right now? West Point, Columbus, okay, so we've done a little bit of better, right? Here's the fundamental thing that changed the Golden Triangle. Tennessee Valley Authority came out with a MegaSite program. Here's what they said. Every bean field, every cornfield, every soybean patch, every group of catfish ponds on the edge of your town, my town, any town, ain't going to be where the next Toyota, Nissan, Mercedes-Benz goes, okay? They said it's got to have some criteria there. They hired a national consultant, site consultant, McCallum Sweeney, said you write the criteria and you score it. They came up with things that made a super site super. Had to have Class 1 railroad, like for you to have 2. Had to be within 50 miles of an airport. Had to be an entertainment area. Had to be 1,500 acres, 1,000 developable. On and on and on and on and on. At the end of the day, they presented this to the whole 80,000 square miles of TVA, all the parts of 7 states, and 2 towns got certified, Columbus and Hoptown, Kentucky. Within just months of getting certified, what is now SDI, the steel mill, came a-knocking. Because the dead Indians and the bug and bunnies were done, the engineering was done, the planning was done, the floodplain stuff was done, everything was ready to go. In fact, the county had already issued notice of intent to issue bonds in the amount of $20 million to support that project. The rest is history. The day we broke ground on that steel mill, I told one of my staffers, Brenda Lathan, I said, take 30 days off. Go buff your puff, do whatever you girls do for relaxation for 30 days. Okay? Pedicure and manicure guys on the back row, you're thinking wrong. Okay? She took 30 days off. Her first day back on the job, she signed her second option. Her first option on her second MegaSite. Within a period of months, we did that, and PACCAR came a-calling. Okay? Go figure. Go figure. TVA then did away with the MegaSite program. After Volkswagen, after Toyota, after Vaki Chemical, after Dow Corning Hemlock, after Toyota, after SDI, and after PACCAR, they said there's no more good sites in the valley. We're done. We knew that wasn't true. We found one at West Point, and we followed their process just like we did on the other two, and we identified and did the same things on the Prairie Belt Power site. Within less than 8 months from the time we unveiled the Prairie Belt Power site, Yokohama had selected that site from 3,100 counties in the country, added up. That's every state except Alaska and Hawaii were in the search. 26 Mississippi communities got invitations. 19 of them filled out the paperwork. Okay? Now, they didn't say it's Yokohama. They said it's Project Triathlon. Well, all of a sudden, lightning struck for the third time. Guess what? 2 communities have been invited to submit megasites in the Tennessee Valley Authority. We've been invited to submit a third one, and the reason it's pending up there is within the next few weeks we expect to announce a 4th megasite, 3rd TVA certified. I will tell you that probably lightning can strike 4 times because all of the preparation's been done. Okay? This stuff is simple. It's simple, but it's costly. If you've got an organization that's got a $150,000 budget, and the lady that used to work at the school for the superintendent answering the phone at the central office is your secretary, and the retired banker is your economic developer, you're probably not going to win, okay? Because it takes, I'm serious. How many big deals locate in those towns? None. The budgets are too small. The resources are too small. You got to have the people. I can't even read my own stuff. You got to have the people. You got to have the utilities. You got to have all those things in place. Well, we got power out there. Look, folks, it ain't just about having a power line out there. It's about, and it's not just about the rate. Big projects are like fat people. They eat a lot, okay? They drink a lot. They do. They use a lot of electricity. They use a lot of water. They use a lot of sewer. They use a lot of gas. So just having stuff out there and ready doesn't get you there. You got to have that educational support, and I'm not really talking K through 12 as much as I am the vocational and the engineering sides at the universities. You got to have that. And it's very rare, okay, probably impossible, that a big project's going to locate somewhere that has a highway. Now, it's going to have a highway, but that can't be the only thing it has, okay? A big project, if you look, whether they use it or not, in the case of PACCAR, they don't use rail. Why in the world would a company like PACCAR not use rail? Anybody? Hush. Anybody? Are y'all awake? Why wouldn't they use rail? They're in the truck business. They don't like trains, okay? They said, we'll pay more to ship it by truck than put it on a train. We don't want trains. But most places want an airport. They want roads. They want a waterway if they can get it, and they airport, railroads, roads, what did I say, 4 of them. Airport, railroads, roads, and water. Yeah, want it all. Then you got to have product. Go online to MDA. Pick your town and look and see how many acres your town, your region, your place has available for industrial development. I will tell you that most of the people in the room will be lucky if you got 500 acres in the aggregate in a site. You got 10 over here, you got 35 over here. Oh, don't forget this 5-acre industrial site, okay? 5-acre industrial site. Well, we'd just soon land 10 jobs paying 50 as one employing 500. How many of you ever heard that? Raise your hand if you heard that. Y'all aren't even being truthful. Thank you. I'm going to tell you, a better philosophy is get one that employs 500 and you'll get 10 that'll employ 52, okay? But look at the sites. You got to have, to get the big projects, you got to have the big sites. That's why these sites are 1,500, 1,000 acres developable. You got to have the sites. We bought, infrastructured, and developed 9,000 acres in 14 years. If we get this next megasite certification, it'll be 1 super site designation, 3 megasite certification, or 4, megasites, 3 of them certified by TVA. Now let's go to resources and funding. Again, that $150,000 budget, that staff's probably not going to win. They just can't win. They don't have the resources. Without telling 1,000 war stories, some of y'all have heard this in the past, it's been on the news. You know, we had to make a decision on on Yokohama within a 24-hour period to get a Sikorsky 76 helicopter in there. We didn't know if it was going to rain, didn't know if we were going to be able to use it. We had to make a decision one Sunday afternoon if we wanted to pay $27,500 for a helicopter for the day, okay? A $150,000 budget with 2 people staff can't do that. It's impossible, okay? To be successful, to land these big ones, you're going to have an adequate staff. Now, I don't subscribe that you got to have 27 employees, okay? But so y'all know, we represent 3 counties and we got a staff of 8. And those 8 people are pretty much humping it every day doing what they're doing, okay? You got to have access to capital. You got to have access to resources. Those supervisors, those city councilmen, those mayors need to understand that we're buying deals. Okay, now I'm probably the only economic developer you've ever met that will say it out loud, and I'll say it on TV. Yeah, we buy the deals. Now, you're not going to buy a deal if you got a crappy site. You're not going to buy a deal if you got crappy labor. You're not going to buy a site if it hasn't got the infrastructure they need. But at the end of the day, those last 2, those final 2s, it's kind of like that Geico commercial where they're checking out, and they said, don't get an auctioneer for your checkout person, and they're bidding, and the guy goes. That's kind of what we're doing. It takes resources. You need to make sure that the infrastructure's there, plans for the infrastructure to be there. What we have done, and we've used it very successfully in the 3 counties that we represent, Mississippi is a reverse referendum state, okay? Which means the Board of Supervisors or the Mayor, City Council can decide they're going to issue bonds for economic development. They don't have to have a project. We go to all of our governments. We get them to do a notice of intent. We get them to go through public hearing. We give the public time to go out and get their 1,500 signatures to call an election. And if they don't, the public hearing's closed, and the county's got the authority to issue bonds for 24 months on a project. We always have dry powder in each and every one of our counties. The day you walk in my door, I'm going to have bonded indebtedness authorized and in an amount sufficient enough to recruit a big deal. Lowndes County, at their next meeting coming up, will authorize $30 million in bonds just to have the authority sitting on the shelf, ready to go, just in case, okay? So, pretty tough. The last thing I want you to know is attitude, okay? This is on my email. My former chairman got me a bumper sticker and brought it to my office. Live every day like your ass is on fire. You can't, I know you think I'm the damn lunch talk for entertainment, I guess. I don't, but seriously, guys, you've got to have somebody in that chair that wakes up every day, that staff, those elected officials, that team that wake up every single day working to do a deal, working to do a deal. Now, the little deals and medium deals, they're going to come, but these big deals, it's got to be made the priority in the organization, and you got to keep it being the priority in the organization. I'm going to close with this. You see that license plate up there? That's mine. I bought that from the Department of Revenue. What does it mean?
Second equals last.
Second equals last. See, we don't have the fortune to be in the tennis business or the golf business or the NASCAR business. See, second place in our business doesn't pay shit. Okay? If you come in second place, you know, you're gonna say, boy, he's in the business 20 years. He really worked hard, okay? Second place pays nothing. There's no money for the schools. There's no money for the city. There's no money for the county. There's less funding for the Economic Development Organization. And mamas and daddies got less money to pay for dance lessons and buy bass boats to take Junior to go bass fishing, okay? So it's really got to be an attitude. And that's kind of how we approach this. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe Max. That was great. I asked Joe Max earlier, I said, Joe Max, isn't the saying, work like your hair is on fire? He said, I don't have any, so that's Our next speaker is Ed Garner. Ed is the recently joined Entergy, Mississippi as the Director of Economic Development. He came to Entergy from Power South Entergy Cooperative in northern Florida. He understands the importance of regional local, and state economic development and has worked with economic developers throughout his career in that regard. Prior to joining Power South, he was the president of economic development and workforce for the Birmingham Business Alliance. He also has more than 13 years of economic development experience on the local level. Please welcome Ed.
I'm pretty sure I heard of Joe Max about 10 years ago, and I'm pretty sure I also thought in my mind at that time that as long as I never have to follow him on a panel, I'll have a good career. Believe it or not, there is another Joe Max out there. You may not believe this. He's not as good looking as this Joe Max is, but I actually have worked at the local level in Alabama for someone who is almost, it could be a carbon copy of you, Joe Max, and you need to meet him someday, for the city of Auburn. But what I will tell you, the most important thing that you could take away from today is if you're a community and you've got a project that comes in the door and it's worth having, assume you're competing with Joe Max. And that's probably the most important thing you can hear, because if you're not competing with this Joe Max, you're competing with a Joe Max in another state. Now, there aren't very many of them, I will promise you that. But you need to realize that you better have your ducks in a row if you're going to win the deal, because he's exactly right. There are no points for second place in this business. I'm going to talk a little bit about the Continental project that I know all of you are familiar with. You'll note that I've only been here for less than a year, and this project went on for 2 years, and it was announced a couple of months ago. So the math isn't that difficult to know that there were a lot of people involved in this project way before I got here. I think the only reason that I'm up here is because they couldn't figure out exactly of all those people that were involved in this project, which one of them should present, so they picked the new guy. But I'll also tell you, I think my role was not to mess it up. So I'm thankful that at least I didn't mess it up. I'm not going to say there weren't some close calls. But the important thing is just talk about a little bit about this project, and I think we can get us caught up on time just a little bit. But Continental was tire, obviously, that went to Hinds County and Clinton. It was a Mike Mullis project, and so many of you in the industry know who Mike Mullis is. And he is probably the most difficult site selection consultant you can work with. Mike would actually be proud for me to say that. If he sent out an RFI, it's probably going to be a few hundred pages, and it's going to go out on Christmas Eve, and he wants you to respond, if you're lucky, by the day after Christmas. So, but it's an incredibly intense process. And so if you get a Mullis project, as you've heard already from these guys, you better be ready long before you ever get a Mullis project. If the first time you decide you're going to fill out an RFI is when you get one of these, you're really wasting your time, to be honest with you. But the first thing that will happen, and this is, as Brian said, a site selection process, but quite honestly, it's a site elimination process. Site selectors and companies are looking for reasons to eliminate you because they want to get it down to a manageable number of sites in a manageable number of states. So don't give them an excuse to eliminate you, which can be missing the deadline. It can be just a number of things that are really just simple things if you think about it, but that's why you've got to be on your A game when you're filling out these RFIs. I think Chad mentioned that earlier today. But you'll see there are a lot of people involved in this project and a lot of organizations involved in this project, and that's why I'm not going to go through all of them and name them out, but you can just look, and we were just part of a larger team. Of course, Hinds County and the Jackson Alliance and MDA played significant roles, really more of the lead roles in this project. But you can see from the first phase, you get this huge RFI. Then you're looking at probably 10 states, 150 sites or more, and so you've got a huge number. So it's a site elimination process. So you want to make sure you stay in the game is what you want to do to live to actually get to the next step. The next step for a large economic development project, and honestly, a large project as opposed to a medium-sized project is probably just more zeros and more volumes of paperwork that you're going to have to do and more money that you're going to have to spend. But the second phase, the company will actually visit the site. Sometimes the consultant does it by himself, sometimes with the engineers. And so then you're starting to spend money. This is the phase where you've got to have all your due diligence in place, but that's just the start of this game. Because then you're going to start spending money on helicopters, on ATVs. I'm not going to name names, but I understand there was also some entertainment that was set up with a band that was supposed to look like it might have been an actual just venue that somebody walked by, because the principal with the company said he really likes live music and that type of thing, and so actually walking by, oh, look at that, there's a band. Oh, it looks like it's the kind of music you like, isn't it? You want to step in for a second? So I understand a number of friends got some free drinks that night. So what the point here is that you really do have to go the extra mile. And for those communities that if you're sitting back waiting for the next visit, for the next call, you're probably not going to get it because there are other communities out doing this. Next phase, though, is you've got to have the site. And you've heard that ad nauseum from Joe Max just told you. And you can't just have a site. You've got to have the due diligence, or a lot of the due diligence already done for these large projects. And then you've got to spend some money and show them what it's going to look like. So you've got to spend some money on the renderings. And more than likely, the due diligence is great, but you're going to have to do a lot more because the borings aren't going to be in the right location. The infrastructure you just designed is not adequate. The site isn't big enough. So by the way, you got to go add 500 acres to the site. So it's not just being prepared, it's the flexibility, and as Joe Mack said, you've got to have the staff with the knowledge and the ability to know how to get this done very quickly. And then the dating phase that's when they're getting serious, and that is when the bidding war starts. And it's not just, a lot of it is incentives, not going to lie to you, that is an important part of this, but also this gets to the stage of what are you willing to do to win this project, and whether it's redesigning your entire workforce program. I know on a Mullis project, when I was in another state, the guy is actually the guy I mentioned earlier. He just built a brand new tech park, put all the infrastructure in, all the roads in, water, sewer, everything, a beautiful 250-acre tech park with fountains in the front of it. The consultant came in and said, you're going to have to tear it all up because it was a Briggs & Stratton small engine project. And the economic developer said, okay. and he landed this very large 700-employee project because he went in, tore up millions of dollars worth of infrastructure they had already put in. So you're looking at numerous site visits. Obviously, MDA played a huge critical role in this project. But if you look at all of the different organizations there at the bottom, the other thing I would leave you with is this is a team sport. I mean, you cannot do it by yourself. And it's intensely competitive. I looked it up just before I came up here. There are 3,144 counties, I think, in the United States, over 19,000 municipalities that are incorporated. A lot of those groups, if not the most of those, especially at the county level, have economic development organizations. There are only a few hundred projects each year of 100 jobs or more, and of this type of project, there are only a handful. So you can understand, and then you've got people like Joe Max that win a lot of them. So there are a lot of communities who never see or land any of these projects. And so this is the dating phase towards the end where you've really got to get a warm fuzzy, or at least the company has to get a warm fuzzy with you because it comes down to trust as well. Are you going to deliver what you've told them you can deliver? And that's where this becomes extremely important. And this is the final elimination phase, and this is where it hurts really badly because I would rather be 20th in a project than second. I hate being second. Those really hurt. So you really don't want to be second. So that's why at the end, you really do whatever you can. If you decide early on if it's a project you want, and if you want it, then you go after it. And you decide early on what you're willing to do. And you certainly wouldn't go beyond that, but don't hold back either. And finally, the marriage phase, and this was announced a couple of months ago. And again, it was great leadership from the governor and from the legislature and from all the entities that were involved in this project. But I would just say that in closing thoughts, the site is obviously critical. If you don't have a site, then you're really not in the game. So you need to decide what you want. And not every community needs a mega site. If you don't have a mega workforce, you probably don't need a mega site. And so I think that's important. So for a lot of communities out there, you just need a site and figure out what that is. Obviously, we need a strong MDA and local economic development groups because that's who is doing all the heavy lifting. And then finally, you got to be willing to invest money and time in the process to win the deal. And it does take that kind of investment in order to be successful. And going forward, I think you've heard of thousands and thousands of economic development organizations seeking these same projects. So there are going to be a lot of losers in this game. But there is a very clear process to follow if you do want to win. So that's all I have for now. And Jonathan, actually, Scott, I think I'll turn it back over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Ed. And our final speaker this morning is Jonathan Daniels. He's the Executive Director and CEO of the Mississippi State Port Authority at Gulfport. He has served in that capacity since June of 2013, and he oversees what is the third busiest port in the U.S. Gulf of Mexico and the second largest importer of green fruits in the United States. The port's capacities include bulk handling, break bulk, and containerized cargo. He brings a wealth of experience to this job in not only port management, but international trade and economic development. He's worked in management capacities in New York, Maine, and Baton Rouge, Louisiana. And actually, his professional development is key to this because he has graduated from the International Program of Port Planning and Management at LSU. And we please welcome at this point, Jonathan Daniels.
Thank you. And as they always say, you do not want to be the coach that follows Bear Bryant. You do not want to be the speaker that follows Joe Max. Ed, I apologize for putting you in that position, but it certainly is great to be here after the speaker that followed Joe Max. Within that, and it's interesting, you always have an opportunity when you speak at these functions to learn a little something on how to engage the crowd. I found it kind of interesting that the greatest laugh that Joe Max got was when he actually swore. So I thought about coming up here and dropping a couple F-bombs right off the bat. Felt that probably was not going to be very appropriate. Should you want to hear that, come down to the dock sometime, listen to our longshoremen, and you will learn more about words that have been developed and have been shared amongst those on the docks than, my gosh, my ears are, you go down the dock, your ears end up very red. As Joe Max and everybody I think have talked about, landing the big one, you may have one opportunity to do that in your career. But how do you define the big one? In Gulfport, when we landed what is now our smallest project, it was huge because it was the first new project we had announced, the first new maritime project since 1999. And we're sitting in the beginning of 2014. So we were an organization that was very pleased with 2 to 3% incremental growth. The more people that ate bananas, the more people that ate pineapples, the more we saw coming through the port. We were a port that actually certainly wanted more babies in the United States because you end up with more banana puree. So you bring more dole, you bring more Chiquita in there, and ultimately you end up with your incremental growth, and we were very happy. 2005 rolls around, August 29th, 2005. This little storm comes through called Katrina and changes the entire environment, not only in Gulfport and on the Gulf Coast, but in the state of Mississippi as a whole. Now all of a sudden the plans for expanding the port have an option for funding. Through catastrophe comes an opportunity. So when we took a look at this, and when I got a call from Blake saying, hey, can you talk about landing the big one? Took a look and said, you know what, it's more about landing the big ones, because everything we land at the port, and oftentimes everything that we land in the state of Mississippi, has an employment connotation to it, and it's big. It's big because maybe the size of the community. Something that occurs in the small community that adds 10 jobs is as important as something that lands in Hinds County that creates 1,000 jobs. We need to celebrate that. But we're also a project, and when we talk about the big one, we talk about the development of a facility that has been on the books for a lot of years. We have $570 million of federal funding managed by our partners at MDA, and as the subrecipient, we have the opportunity over the next 18 months to finish one of the largest infrastructure projects in the state of Mississippi, not just for Gulfport, not just for the port, but for projects that occur in West Point, projects that occur in Hinds County. Because as products come in to be able to support these projects from throughout the world, wouldn't it be better to use a Mississippi port that send it through LA and Long Beach or send it through Charleston? And I'll talk about that in a few minutes and why that's very important for our strategic defense corridor and why Mississippi's defense workers in the last and the bases in the last few years have been using bases or have been using ports in Texas as well as Charleston. When you look at landing the big one, for us, it's part of transforming the Port of Gulfport. It's a project that actually started in the early 2000s and was hastened by the assistance of HUD with $570 million. But what we look at is customer-driven development. And that happens in two ways. One, for our existing tenants. It's taking the likes of Dole, it's taking the likes of Crowley, it's taking the likes of Chemours, formerly DuPont, and making investments that allow us the opportunity to grow organically, because sometimes landing the big one does not mean that you're bringing someone in from another state or another country. It's helping your existing tenants, it's helping those existing companies be able to double and sometimes triple their cargo throughput, and ultimately that leads to doubling and tripling the amount of ILA hours. That's more employment. That's landing the big one, and it's doing that from within. Just what our customers needed. We worked for years with CH2M Hill, Neil Schaefer, and others to be able to develop the plans necessary to then hand that off to the contractors with oversight by YAJV, Yates Anderson joint venture, which we have William right here now. Good Mississippi companies overseeing good Mississippi contractors. We're building rail, 26,000 feet of brand new rail. We're building 300,000 square feet of warehousing. We're building maintenance and repair facilities. We've got a company out of Hattiesburg doing a $58 million wharf construction project to be able to support 3 ship-to-shore gantry cranes that arrived last month from Shanghai. And you look at the bottom right-hand corner, that's an $85 million contract, which was done with Continental Construction out of Memphis to be able to build new bulk facilities. That allowed us the opportunity to look at some non-traditional activities. Because when you are given $570 million from the federal government, you know there will be red tape and you know there will be requirements and criteria associated with that. They came up with a fun one that said you have to create 1,300 jobs. You ever see 1,300 jobs on a container terminal? When you look over in Rotterdam and you have 5 people working one of the largest container terminals in the world, they work out of something that looks like not a hangar, but a air traffic control tower. Everything is automated. So we needed to get creative. We needed to diversify. And that allowed us the opportunity to bring in groups such as McDermott, Edison Schwest Offshore. Yes, the University of Southern Mississippi is a tenant at the port, and Island View Casino. But we decided in late 2013 and 2014 to make a very strong strategic move away from primarily containers and move into the oil and gas industry. Now, some of you are probably looking at me right now and saying that may be the dumbest move you ever could have considered, considering where oil and gas is right now. But we went in a very different direction. We are not a petroleum port. You don't see the tankers coming in and leaving. Nor are we such as the Port of Fushan, where you have daily ins and outs supporting the rigs. But we are now one of the leading ports in the United States that supports subsea activities. So the large-scale construction projects that occur at 9,000 feet oftentimes start with production of pipe and other activities at the Port of Gulfport. In May 19th of 2014, 5 days after it was announced that Chiquita was leaving, that hurt was tempered pretty significantly. We gave up 58 jobs ultimately for about 175 jobs. I'll spend $58 any day to get $175 back. We'll do that at any time. We announced McDermott International coming in. And while there was a lot of fanfare associated with Chiquita going to New Orleans, the Times-Picayune, in an editorial 5 days after we made this announcement, saying, while the Port of New Orleans and state of Louisiana was out courting and spending $15 to $20 million in incentives to be able to get Chiquita here for only 58 jobs, the state of Mississippi, led by Governor Bryant, swooped in under the cloak of darkness and stole a business that had been in Louisiana for 90 years. Then we followed that up with landing the big one. Because we were firmly engaged in the oil and gas industry, and we wanted to expand our customer base, expand our tenant base, and go fully into oil and gas, we acquired the Ingalls facility, which was being sold off as they were shutting down their composites activities and consolidating everything in Pascagoula. We made an offer to Ingalls, and ultimately they accepted that. And on March 27th of 2015, at 2:30 in the afternoon, we executed all the documents and transferred $32 million into Huntington Ingalls' account. 15 minutes later, the Board of Commissioners met and approved a 40-year agreement with Edison Schwest Offshore to take over all 116 acres. Again, under the cloak of darkness, the state of Mississippi swept in and stole from Louisiana one of their great businesses. During the next year, MDA took the lead on negotiating an incentive deal, and on February 8th of this year, down in Gulfport, led by the governor and other state officials, we executed the deal that allows Edison Schwest, Top Ship, to invest $68 million during the next few years, and they have guaranteed 700 jobs by the end of 2020 and 1,000 jobs by the end of 2022. Again, why is that important? Because we have 1,300 jobs that we have to create associated with the port development. Yeah, but it's located 5 miles inland at the port's inland port facility. Well, there was an amendment done back in 2007 that allowed for any money that was spent on an inland port facility, any jobs created there as part of the HUD money could count towards our 1,300. We are well over halfway there by being able to sign this deal. So it's not only the money that was invested by the state, money that was invested by the port, but it's also getting that type of job commitment, that employment commitment. For us, that's landing a big one. That's the Top Ship location. It's out on Seaway Road. You can see it from I-10, 116 acres. One of the facilities was constructed about 5 years ago for $50 million, so we think it was a pretty darn good deal to spend $32 million to be able to secure that entire property. That investment was made by the Port Authority, of which during the next 20 years, Edison Schwest will be paying us back plus interest. But we've had several big ones, some of them larger than others. If you look at since 2013, Chemours, which is formerly DuPont, we have signed them to a 60-year agreement, and they're making an $85 million private investment. Island View Casino, again, we talk about diversification. Having the casino there, having a hotel that was basically blown away in 2005, we signed a 50-year agreement that paved the way for a $58 million private investment. McDermott, 40-year agreement, $25 million private investment. Top Ship, 40-year agreement, $68 million private investment. Dole Fresh Foods, they've been there for 50 years. They have signed the longest terminal lease that they have throughout any of their terminals in the United States. Gulf Coast Shipyard Group, our smallest tenant, but created 92 of the 1,300 jobs. That was the first new maritime tenant since 1999. We needed some level of success. So as small as they are, they truly were the big one for us. University of Southern Mississippi, with moving the research vessel Point Sur there, Gulfport will be the epicenter for oceanographic research in the Gulf of Mexico. Crowley Latin American Services, we're finalizing a 20-year deal. Gulf Coast Freezer and Storage, 20-year agreement. And just this past November, we were notified by the Department of Defense that Gulfport has been named one of 17 strategic ports in the United States, one of only 17 that allow us the opportunity to handle all of Mississippi's military bases on MOB and DMOB. But more bases can be handled out of Gulfport than any other port in the strategic port system. Not bad for a little banana port down on the coast of Mississippi. But what's on the horizon? You can't stop. Just because you land the big ones or even the little ones, it doesn't even, sometimes it feels almost like relief, not celebration. But then it's time to move to the next one. We're working right now on what could be a 40-year agreement with an oil and gas company based in Houston, Texas. It would be a $600 million private investment. And at that point, we would have about 1.5 times the amount of private investment as opposed to public investment made by HUD. We're working to secure a global carrier that will open up Mississippi's port and Mississippi's manufacturers to Asia, to the Med, to Northern Europe, to South America. So you no longer have to go to the port of Mobile, the port of New Orleans. All of that can be done out of Mississippi's ports. And because we landed the strategic port designation, we are now in the process within the next few weeks of announcing that Gulfport and the CB base will host a foreign military sales depot, one of only 3 in the United States. When I accepted, or before I accepted the job to come down here, I called 5 of my friends. I'd spent time in Baton Rouge. All 5 of them said, don't take the job. Don't take it. One of the reasons is because you cannot be successful in the state of Mississippi. Look at what's going on here. Look at what all of you have accomplished. We have been successful in the state of Mississippi, and will continue to do it. Sometimes we go into the cloak of darkness. Sometimes we go into our neighbors in Alabama and Louisiana and take something from them. But it's because we have a great story to tell. They're not here because we're so friendly. Now maybe they go see Joe Max because he's awfully friendly. Swears at him. I may drop an F-bomb before the end of this is done. But we have the opportunity to continue to be successful. But when you're looking at landing the big one, sometimes size does matter. The 3 cranes that arrive from Shanghai are 3 of the largest cranes to arrive in the Gulf Coast. And in working with groups such as Mississippi Power, these will be powered by direct feed, the only ones in the United States. They will be the most heavily powered cranes in the United States. Again, doing something a little bit different. And I can't wait to turn those things on the first time, seeing that meter spin, 1.2 megs apiece. So there's a reason Kemper is being built. With that, thank you so much, and I think we're going to open up to questions right now.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. I do have just a couple of quick questions for the panel, and I'm going to direct the first one to Ed and Brian, and that is, the utilities really work with a number of economic developers in your area and across the state. Explain a little bit about why that's so important and how that works.
You want me to go first?
Yeah, go for it, Brian.
All right. Yeah, we actually do, and I'll add to that, we actually work with each other pretty well, whether it's SMEPA, you heard from Mitch this morning, TVA and Entergy, because somebody mentioned that the team approach that it takes, and really we're all some part of that. You know, none of us really make up the whole. MDA is typically our lead organization, but utilities can play a major role and actually are counted on to play a major role in economic development. And I'll give you an example, and that's the site development, which has been such a topic of discussion today. All of the utilities have some sort of site certification program at a varying level. You mentioned Joe Max TVA's mega site program. We have a certified site program in South Mississippi that we help fund and have developed, and we're actually revamping that as we speak. I know Entergy does a qualified site program and is looking at additional things. So we're really there to help really on the ground level. It's electricity is a big part of some projects is not. So we play that role in terms of how we're going to deliver a reliable power at a good price, but then we take on a much bigger role as a regional economic development organization.
And just to follow up, Entergy Mississippi, I'm sure much like Mississippi Power, we've been in the state almost 100 years and plan to be here for at least another 100 years. And so we're only as successful as our communities are. And so we are here for the long term, and so it makes a lot of sense for us to work with our communities to support them, whether it's with qualified sites. We both have community development programs, really to get our communities to where they can compete better for projects. And so we provide those supportive roles for the long term, because sometimes communities from a political process or what have you can have ups and downs, but as the electric utility, hopefully we can be that common, consistent entity that's focused on economic development and supporting our communities.
And Joe Max, over the last couple of years, you've had the link has now expanded from Lowndes to Clay to Tippecanoe County. Talk a little bit about the importance of the regional approach in making all this work with economic development.
Yeah, up until a few years ago, we were just one county. And then we added Clay County, which is West Point, and then we added Starkville, Tippecanoe County. Probably what it does for us, I mean, obviously it gives us more resources, gives us more money. Each of the counties help contribute. We'll get private sector funds coming in and other pots of money coming in. But it also gives us a more diverse hand of what we can look at. We've got different counties have different things that we can sell there. The deals that we sell in Starkville are probably not going to be the same deals we sell in West Point, not going to be the same deals we sell in Lowndes County. It's given us more resources. You know, I will tell you, in the early days, we were against it. We didn't want to do it. Lowndes County was winning on its own. It didn't really need any help. The Clay County guys came to us. The Oktibbeha County guys came to us and said, we want to play in your system. We want to be on your team. And we said yes. And after it happened, the legislative delegation, the senators and the congressmen and other people, even the state came to us and said, gosh, you just made our job a whole lot easier, because now that you're working as a three-county group, it's easier for us for the feds to designate resources to go there, to tap different pots of money, and it gave us a better product to sell. We've been asking of late, you know, do you want to add more counties? No, I think we're worried about where we can do that job and do it well. I think we got enough diversified mix, and 3 kids are enough for us.
Jonathan, I think just based on your presentation today, a lot of people probably didn't realize all of the assets that the port brings to the state of Mississippi and how valuable it is. Can you talk a little bit about kind of the next step, and particularly from an infrastructure standpoint of where do we go to continue to make the port grow?
We're in a great position right now in that we never expected to be at a point where if the next 2 big ones land, we're out of space. And we're out of space probably about a year before the entire project is supposed to be completed. But we aren't stopping there. We have an environmental impact statement that currently is in draft form. We're working at answering the last few details now with EPA. That would allow us the opportunity to add close to 200 additional acres in a dredge and fill concept. You're probably looking at about 3 to 4 years before being available. But one of the companies we're working with right now just sent us a letter of intent. They want the first 50 acres that are available in the new 160 acres on the west side. So we can't afford to rest on our laurels. We're also continuing to look at what the deepening project will be, hopefully to be able to bring in some larger vessels. But that being said, when you look down on site right now, you may see a vessel that's 850 feet in length, drafting 36 feet, carrying 50,000 tons of cargo. So what we can do right now is pretty substantial, but we're always looking at that next step to be able to expand the port.
Thank you. Well, with that, we're going to wrap up. I thank everyone for coming this morning, but would you please join me in thanking our panel again? What a great job they did in explaining all the wonderful things we have going on in Mississippi. We now move next door for our luncheon. A wonderful speaker, Jamie Clark, will talk about how we achieve new heights in economic development. Please join us. Thank you so much for being here.